with the news as we head into the second half of November. Dr. Mike is back after another vacation. Dr. Mike, how was your time away this time?
Horrendous experience. I mean, first of all, I had to wait a really long time to get my drink at the pool.
I think that was a rhetorical question.
Wow. First world problems. And I understand that to recover from this horrible experience, you've got another holiday lined up soon.
Yeah, we really need to cleanse our palate. The taste after this experience is terrible, so we're going somewhere else.
Send us a postcard. Okay, let's jump into the news here. We're going to start with two stories that we should have covered last week, but for different reasons we didn't. These are both stories that are ongoing. They started about 2 weeks ago. The first one is really, it's a bit of a sad story. It's brought the abortion debate back back to the headlines in Poland. It started actually at the end of September when a woman named identified only as Isabella, 30 years old, she died in a hospital in Pszczyna. I can never say this name. Pszczyna,
wasn't it?
What?
Wasn't it Pszczyna?
Okay, fine. It's a place like halfway between Bielsko-Biała and Katowice, I think. She was 22 weeks pregnant, and she was in the hospital. Dr. Mike, now help us here on the details. She was there in the hospital because of severe defects in a fetus she was carrying. The doctors said that they could not remove the fetus until it kind of died on its own naturally. I don't know the proper, respectful way to say it. Let me finish. And because they didn't, some kind of sepsis crept into her system, killing her. And so, so some people, mostly on the left, are saying this is an example of Poland's extreme abortion law affecting the health of women. Some people on the other side are saying that, in fact, this particular case was covered by the existing law, protecting the health of mothers, and they're blaming the doctors involved, not really the abortion law. Last week, people took to the streets all over the country, including here in Krakow, with protests, protesting not only the death of Isabella, but also the government's change in abortion law. What was it, about a year and a half ago now, I think, and demanding that it be liberalized. Again, this is an issue that comes back from time to time, back in the news. Let's back up to the case of Isabella. Dr. Mike, take us to the medical side of this. I'm not a doctor. You are. I don't understand how this sepsis wasn't detected and treated in time. This sound, losing a pregnant woman, this sounds like something that would happen in 1921, not 2021. Help me understand how this happened.
First of all, women still do die during pregnancy and giving birth. And even in the modern world, it's no longer, counted in the couple of percent of pregnancies. It's now counted in the one in several thousand pregnancies that can end in death for the mother. But it still happens.
But the doctors knew she was at risk, high risk.
It was a high risk pregnancy, and this is where I'm going to really step back and say that I saw these headlines, a week ago, but the actual details haven't been very clear. The lawyers for the families presented like one series of events, the hospital another. So the facts that I think are more or less stated that we can rely on are 30 years old, 22nd week of pregnancy. The pregnancy was known to have some kind of complications. Mainly I've been hearing some kind of defects, but not specifically what kind.
Severe deformities, let's say.
But severe already is a little more specific than some articles have given.
Okay.
But we know some kind of defects or issues with the child as well. And apparently the main reason I've been hearing that she was admitted to hospital was that her water broke, basically. 22 weeks, that's basically, it's a premature birth. For a very healthy child, 22 weeks is kind of like the bottom borderline of viability outside of the womb. But apparently this is not the direction we're going into anyway. She showed up at the hospital. She was having other issues, but then as well, the details that are cloudy. And at first, I heard that when she was admitted to hospital, the fetus had already died. Then they said it died shortly after, and then she died within 24 hours of being admitted to the hospital, which is very quick, even for sepsis or anything like that. So this is why I keep wondering maybe there were other complications, something else going on there. She apparently texted out to family members or friends that she's worried that they're waiting to remove the the fetus just to see what happens. But I'm not sure if this message was sent when it was already known that the fetus was dead, or if the fetus was still alive. These are like the gray areas that haven't been clearly presented yet.
Well, and also in this text, apparently, this communication was with her mother, where she said specifically that the doctors mentioned that the law does not allow them to intervene until the fetus is dead, kind of, again, on its own.
Which is not true. That's not how the law works. Nothing has changed in this scenario where if the mother's health and well-being and life is at risk, there is no issue whatsoever with removing the fetus, especially in a situation where it looks like the fetus was already dying or dead. And once it's dead, you go ahead and basically set up for the procedure to remove at that moment, it's the remains, because it can cause, especially at 22 weeks, it can become necrotic, sepsis, and stuff like that. But the fact that the sepsis that killed her set in so quickly makes me wonder there was something else going on earlier. We just don't know because this is private medical information, but part of it's been made public. But the issue of saying that that the law prevented the doctors doesn't really stack up, because it doesn't. There already is information going on. Yes, it sounds more like the doctors were negligent here, malpractice. The rumors going around is the doctors barely even saw this patient. They saw her a few times, and they were basically spending more time just in the faculty lounge, chilling and like, wait another 2 hours, another test, give me another blood result.
Yeah, but first of all, you're right to point out that some of the details are in dispute, and we don't know everything. So that's fair. We have to, we're not working with a complete set of facts. So that's fair enough. But all the same, if a woman is admitted in a high risk pregnancy, or the fetus is known to be dead or dying, wouldn't this woman, Isabella, wouldn't she be at the top of the priority list in terms of monitoring what's going on?
Exactly. This is why I'm saying that this looks more like an issue of malpractice on the side of the doctors and the hospital, at least based on information that we have at this point, than the doctors saying like, no, for legal reasons we can't do anything, because that just doesn't add up. It doesn't, like, the logical thread there doesn't really connect. It seems more likely that the doctors just messed up, didn't care, didn't realize how serious the case was. There are also situations where outside factors, something that, they expect, she'll be fine. We just wait a few more hours till, some results come in, and then we'll work on the procedure. But, sometimes a person that looks perfectly healthy or fine can be in a serious state overnight. And because they weren't monitoring her properly, they didn't notice these changes. We don't know these details right now. But the argument out there that this was brought in by the abortion laws, the new ones, makes no sense, because the new laws did not change anything when it comes to removing a fetus for this to protect the mother. That's been the law forever. You think
somebody's being opportunistic here?
This is what I really don't like about these issues, that politicians on all sides of these arguments like to use these cases to rally support and to make it political to get votes. And no matter what side of this debate you're on, you realize it's a complicated issue, very serious, ethical, moral, social impacts, and it shouldn't be used for just political fodder.
Let me just create a bit of a sidebar here for a moment, since you mentioned the issue of medical malpractice. I'm curious about something, because in all my years in Poland, many, many years of following the news, you see tragic stories like this from time to time involving the improper delivery of a baby, or someone goes in the hospital with a routine illness and ends up dead or maimed or whatever. These things happen. And almost never do you see, highly publicized stories about doctors or medical teams being held criminally liable in Poland. It very rarely happens. And I'm curious about what you think about this, because on the one hand, I wouldn't like Poland to have like an American style system where, I slipped on your floor, so you owe me $1 billion. I don't want that. But and it has to be, we have to point out that in the world of medicine and healthcare, we're asking doctors to take on inherently risky procedures that have often a low chance of success. Someone who's, your heart surgeon who's in charge of a transplant, we don't necessarily hold them criminally liable if it doesn't work out. And so it's a flexible, kind of vague standard of, what constitutes malpractice. But in your experience and your opinion, do you think doctors tend to get the benefit of the doubt to an extreme here in Poland when it comes to investigations of how they perform their duties.
I would argue that yes, they do, and there's a couple of factors going on here. Like you were saying, Poland differs from the U.S. that it's less of a litigious society. It's a lot more complicated to take a doctor to court. Plus, the culture just isn't really set up that way. That isn't like the reaction that people have here. Also, when something does go wrong in a hospital, it's other doctors that generally investigate. And there is this kind of mentality of like covering for your own, or layman's, these plebs won't understand the nuances of our field, so they don't know that this doctor, probably didn't make the best choices, but it can happen to anyone.
They will close ranks and kind of protect their own.
There's part of that as well, and there's also this issue that in the U.S., evidence-based medicine has been basically the cornerstone for decades. In Poland and in Europe in general, it is definitely there, but not to the point of it being that. If a doctor in Poland doesn't go step by step with the procedures that are considered, the best, then there is no legal liability for that. In the U.S., if somebody comes in sick, it's almost like the policies and procedures are almost like an algorithm. You do this, then you do that, and if the doctor wavers from
like a flow chart, almost.
Exactly, and if a doctor wavers from that procedure in any way, if he doesn't have a damn good reason for it and things go bad, then he can be liable. In Poland, it's kind of more like they could think of it more of an art than a science. A lot of doctors say like, yes, we like these procedures and policies that we get from different countries that we've introduced ourselves. But if a doctor doesn't follow them that strictly, it doesn't adhere to them, it's like, well, he's a doctor, he's the experienced
I would love
one.
to see some stats about how many doctors are prosecuted for medical malpractice and what the consequences involved are, because just anecdotally, like I said, from following the news, you see tons and tons of stories about questionable outcomes, but very rarely do you see doctors, stories about doctors stripped of their license, etc.
Scenarios where the doctor was drunk or something along those lines. These extreme cases. Yes. But if a doctor just doesn't do the job as well as he probably could have or she could have, then it gets under the rug, sent to another hospital.
And on top of that, I suspect, if anybody has documentation or numbers to prove me wrong, please, by all means, let me know. But I suspect that even if you go through the process of, claiming damages, and God knows how long that takes in Poland, you're going to get 5,000 zlotys for your suffering, 3,000 zlotys, a token nothing, really.
I mean, there are very few cases where the courts give out huge payouts to the families.
And huge in Poland is like 50,000 zlotys.
I mean, in Poland, it's also gauged differently. It's like in the U.S., you can really upsell, any kind of tragedy. Well, here
lawyers.
But here it's kind of the other way around. It's okay, this child will now, that because of a bad procedure, is going to be sick for the rest of her life. So you get 100,000 up front to look for to help, and then you get, say, 1,500 zlotys a month now for the next 18 years to help for bringing in a nurse every day or every week to help with care.
Well, we'll see if more details come out in this case, but definitely a tragic occurrence. But let's move on to another story. Again, it's been going on for a few weeks now. Completely different context. Yet another point of conflict between the European Union and Poland is a coal mine called the Turów facility. And Dr. Mike, the EU has ordered Poland with a pointy finger in their face to close it down. Poland refused to do so for reasons that we'll get into in just a moment. And theoretically, we'll see how this plays out. Theoretically, he's paying a penalty of €1 million a day. For
no. The mine is 500,000.
Oh, excuse me. It's only for half price. Okay.
Yeah, the $1 million is for the other issue that we no doubt will be talking about.
Yeah, sorry, I got my fines mixed up. And Poland is, continuing in their defiant stance. Give us an update on what's going on here. Basically, give us a quick thumbnail sketch background and what's the current status.
Basically, you have a coal mine in southern Poland near the border with the Czech Republic, and actually not too far from the border with Germany. It's actually a region of Europe with a lot of coal mining going on.
Is this what was used to be known as the Sudetenland, just out of...
Basically, yeah, we're in that general vicinity. And this mine provides coal for power plants in that area, and it provides power for, it's about 7% of the country's energy production.
Significant.
So that is, if they shut down tomorrow, in the whole country, you'd have brownouts or rolling blackouts, because that's big enough to cause some major impacts on the country. But the mining there, because of the how deep they've gone, and everything like that, has caused issues with with groundwater and the water levels there. So it's causing lack of water in some areas while flooding in other areas. Thing is, it's not the only mine there, and it's not the only mine causing problems. And these problems have been known for better part of it 2 decades. some mitigating factors have been put in, but this is kind of the thing. When you mine, this happens. People living around mines know that there was always issues with this. But the Czech Republic basically took Poland to court, to the EU court, to stop them from mining there. Which stopping the mining won't automatically stop the problem. That's besides the point. There's also another issue. They took Poland, like the country, directly to court, and not actually. This is what somebody like a lawyer friend of mine described to me. They kind of didn't take the actual mining company, which is mainly government owned, but that's the entity that you should technically take to court. Instead, they took Poland to court, and somebody told me like this actually doesn't really work that way. It's like going to the government to like stop what a independent autonomous corporation is doing. It doesn't work that way. They can't then just shut it down. It's not an autocratic.
But what's the Czech Republic's case? That this is causing damage on their side of the border?
Exactly,
or what?
yeah. This is that kind of like third-party scenario where your actions are having negative impacts on ours.
Like structural issues.
Structural,
maybe.
water contamination, water access, etc. But their mines are doing the same problem to them as well. It's just the way kind of mines work.
It does, to me, actually sound... I mean, one's first reaction is, well, hold on. So, like, presumably there's the first thing is like, does the problem start immediately you cross the border into the Czech Republic? That like all the Polish villages around, they've got their water is fine, but as soon as you go into the Czech Republic, then you turn the taps and only coal comes out, or brown sludge, and you kind of think, well, okay, so this is probably something that's been a problem that's been accumulating over a period of time. And you would think that the rational solution to this is like, the water levels, the water table's dropping, we're not getting so much water. Maybe that power plant has something to do with it. Maybe we should go speak with them and see if we can come to some kind of, arrangement, like build a pipe to bring extra water in or something like that.
They've been talking for years, but there's been a lot of bad blood between all the parties involved.
Yes, right. This now sounds a lot more persuasive.
Exactly. And then, there were elections in the Czech Republic campaign, and oddly enough, this issue really got ramped up by the previous government at this time. And, now, the elections are over, the government has changed there, and the question is, why isn't this issue gone away? Because, well, it went too far. There's no way to pull it back now. And as I mentioned earlier, the Poland has been ordered to to stop mining there immediately, which will mean that they'll have to turn off the power plant there, which you just cannot do. And they basically said, like, the judge in Brussels, in the EU, can't force this kind of action because is just the same way as if there's a house on fire and stealing water from your neighbor to put that fire out, and just says you're stealing water, you have to stop right now. It's like, no, I can't. This will cause significant, immediate negative consequences that can't be dealt with. Judges can only interject to a certain extent here. So Poland actually asked for a stay. The court said no, there will be no stay on this, which is also kind of weird because that would be the normal reaction. It's like, yes, technically we're fining you, but we're letting you keep doing this because we can't actually tell you to stop turn off this power plant right away. A lot of people saying like, oh, this is just like coal, dirty energy, we should all go green. But this court case has nothing to do with like...
Not exactly an attack on coal, but it does kind of add to the problems or issues that coal deals with. Coal kind of on attack from all sides. What was the name of this conference in Glasgow last week?
COP26.
Where they all promised to stop using coal by next week or something like that.
Oh, I think that there's a firm commitment that rather like the tide is not going to come any further up the beach, the temperature will not rise by more than 1.5 degrees.
Yeah, but I think Mike is right. They have promised to consider, to think about planning, potentially maybe a meeting to talk about possibly... theoretically,
considering where we'll decide to hold the next meeting,
exactly,
and the next lunch and the next.
Coal. They stop at that.
Coal, just, as I said, on attack from all sides. But who's got a better substitute? Who's got a replacement? I know we talked about this before. Solar and wind, and it's not going to make it.
It's nuclear, isn't it?
It's kind of funny that because renewable in Poland has come up as an issue as well. I know we didn't discuss this before, but there's in Poland they have a subsidies program. So if somebody wants to set up photovoltaics at home, the government helps pay back part of the loan over I think like a 7-year period. So in a lot of scenarios, you can actually it makes sense for somebody to get their electricity that way, because basically any surplus electricity you purchase, the electrical company has to buy it from you wholesale. Electrical companies, power plants weren't happy with that because A, the infrastructure wasn't set up for that. B, more solar power is produced during the daytime in places where they don't need more power. So they're getting surplus power that they can't send off anywhere else. And then they have to sell back energy during the night or other periods when they can't produce more power from people that demand more power because they had solar panels. So I gave you guys energy, give it back to us. So the laws are actually going to be changing with that starting next spring. It's going to be a little bit different when it comes to the way prosumers can sell their extra electricity. Instead of 7 years, it'll be 15 years that the loan will be paid back. And a lot of people are saying that over such a long period of time, then it won't make sense for people to buy solar panels for the homes anyway. But apparently it's in the hundreds of thousands of photovoltaic installations have been put in place in the last couple of years here in Poland. It's become really popular. I don't know. Have you guys gotten phone calls from people asking if you're the owner of a home and would like to set up solar panels?
I never answer my phone. So
okay, I rarely ever do, but they've actually one of the few that ever leave voicemail. And I've had at least 3 or 4 in the past 2 months about that.
So I'm thinking about something else. Going back to coal, I'm thinking about how in Krakow, I know this is a common sight throughout the country, and this is the time of the year, actually, even last month, this is the time of the year when you see the coal deliveries on the sidewalk and people shoveling it through those little windows at street level to the basement. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived in a flat that was basically a converted coal.
This is the time of the year for that, getting prepared. So I'm just thinking about all the basements full of
sunlight,
dirty coal rocks and whatnot.
Well, they're all banned now in Krakow, so you won't see those anymore.
I don't know if they're banned, but they're still around.
They're still around, but they're not like when I first moved here.
No, not at all. Okay, let's move up to, let's leave last week behind us and move up to this week. Report out this week from a foundation.
Bring the news up to date.
A foundation called two foundations, the Robert Schuman Foundation, I don't know them, sorry, and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. That was the German chancellor.
He was the first post.
So I'm going to assume they're both very much pro-EU institutions. A report they put out.
It depends which Robert Schuman you're talking about. The one I'm familiar with was a pianist and composer in the 19th century.
Probably not.
Who went mad.
Probably not. But based on a report they put out this week, they say that thanks to European Union membership, Polish people are earning about 30% more than they otherwise would. According to them, they say about 1,400 zlotys a month. That's roughly a quarter of, maybe a little more than a quarter of the average wages these days, is attributable directly to European Union membership because of investments and integration and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, around here, we're mostly, EU skeptics, I think, to one degree or another, but this is what the numbers say. Is this a case of cherry picking, guys, do you think? Or is this hard proof that, in fact, EU membership has definitely benefited the average Polish person?
Well, I'm gonna speak up first here because, as you well know, I've always been a staunch fan of the Brussels Strasbourg-based institution.
Since when?
Well, no, actually, for a long time I was. It was only in the early 2000s that the jaundice started spreading. But no, I think that this is probably exactly true because, of course, if nothing else, the European Union is a single market. And prior to Poland joining the European Union, it would not have been as easy for Polish goods to be freely exported around the bloc. Once Poland was a member, and I'm sure that there were powerful existing members who were lobbying hard to make sure that cheap Polish goods did not kind of destroy their markets. But nevertheless, Poland produces enormous amounts of agricultural produce, and I think that's a big tranche of the movement of trade in the European Union, and of course the EU funds coming in for infrastructure and so on. So I think I'm sure that's true.
Dr. Mike, I'd look say if you're talking strictly dollars and cents, not at the bigger picture, not the politics of it, not the trade-offs, but if you're talking strictly dollars and cents, I don't think you can even argue with the accuracy of the statement that the EU has been a huge economic plus for Poland.
No, you can't. I mean, and this is where Josh was going, that basically, it's a larger, theoretically open market, which is just more conducive to better business business and economic growth. That's, undeniable. That's how free markets technically should work. And I would say that, it's despite the EU, Poland has grown because it's supposed to be an open market, but there's a lot of factors, like you didn't want to talk about. There are trade-offs that I think have actually slowed down what could have been even more growth. And talk about was also mentioned here, like direct infrastructure investments, stuff like that. But even this article refers to that in the report, they said at least 3 times more of the growth was from just opening up the markets than the direct investments. So the direct investments, which is what people always talk about and see and think is the biggest boom in the EU, is actually at best 25% of that, if not less. But it gets most of the credit. And I believe that if the markets were opened up more, if this quote unquote cheap Polish products could have spread to the rest of the EU faster, Polish economic growth would have been even better.
Well,
and we should also mention the fact that they always talk about these direct investments. You have to remember these direct investments are made by the taxes that people pay. So it's basically your own money coming back to you.
The report clearly, I think, is meant to make or at least to support the political case for, deeper integration and to kind of dampen any talk of a poll exit and whatnot, to remind people that these issues directly affect their pocketbook and their standard of living and whatnot. At what point, though, does this become kind of economic facts become political propaganda? The economic facts and benefits kind of paper over other issues that are not so flattering and complimentary for Brussels.
Economic booms are basically presented by politicians for political gains instead of continued economic gains. Even the way these headlines are usually structured, it makes it sound like the bureaucracy we all hate is responsible for all these booms. No, it's actually quite the opposite. The bureaucracy that we hate is preventing this from being even better than it could be. That's my argument. That's my opinion anyway.
I mean, it is one of these things on this kind of broader trend that, I mean, and I was following, a lot of this has been in the British media as well. I mean, it's clearly of interest. I mean, I suspect partly because of the whole issue with Brexit, the fact that there are still many, many people in the establishment and the British media who did not want Brexit to happen, and they seem to be seizing on this as like kind of, is Poland going to be the next terrible nation to try and leave the European Union? And it seemed, the government has repeatedly come out and said, like, no, we want, we have no intention of leaving the Europe. I mean, it completely stands to reason that in any analysis of the current situations, it's far better for Poland to be in than out. And Poland and Britain are not comparable in this particular analysis. But yet, this whole thing and, a handful of other issues is seen as like, it's almost like these people actually don't want Poland to be in the EU.
And that's the weird thing, that always the people that talk about poll exit, if anything, they're creating an issue that isn't there. And, yeah. And that could actually then increase the interest in that concept. It's like the Barbra Streisand effect here, just with like a political concept. It's like nobody was thinking about this, noticing this, but like now that you mention it, let me think about it.
Let me throw a theoretical at you. You look at the cases of, let's see, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and Greece. And I think all of them were net recipients from the EU budget for like 3 decades or more. I mean, just a river of cash flowed into these countries for year after year after year. It's hard to imagine in today's European Union that Poland will be a net recipient for that long. And the day will come when Poland is a net contributor or the benefit is negligible. Can you imagine, Dr. Mike, if Poland becomes a net contributor and a sustained net contributor, do you see a significant fall off in support for EU membership after that point?
Not necessarily. It depends on the scale as well. The question is like, why don't we just stop contributing or in general paying into EU like that to begin with? A lot of people don't realize that the main reason countries pay into the EU and some get more and some get less is not necessarily because the EU wants to, quote unquote, build up Poland's infrastructure, but it has to do with the fact that, before Poland or these other nations joined the EU, they had customs and duties when it came to imports and exports, things coming and going. And the government raised money that way. And one of the conditions of joining the EU, which was the common market, was there could be no more taxes and duties. So the government would quote unquote lose money. And then a lot of people have to sit down and calculate, well, okay, how many billions is the government going to lose in revenue over this course of these next few years? How much are they going to gain? And we're going to calculate. And a lot of these basically investments and payments are just quote unquote making up for what Poland would theoretically had received in duties and taxes and revenue over this time.
It's moving money on an accounting ledger.
Exactly. And
it's not actual
it's
cash.
not necessarily that, okay, the EU is, I mean, part of it is, of those investments are that the EU trying to bring Poland back into the same level as the rest of the EU. But the main issue here is just revenues that Poland would otherwise have gotten. But the thing is, because Poland is part of the EU, its economy has boomed, so tax revenue has increased anyway because of that. So I would argue that, once the economy is at a certain point, it shouldn't be either a net contributor or recipient. It just stop the payments either way.
There's also actually a priority in terms of the EU's infrastructure investments because, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the first, if you like, complete motorway or autostrada in this country was like from the border with Germany to Krakow, and now it's been extended beyond, and in fact, this road is part of, I forget what's like, the E24, which is basically, it's a trans-European highway that goes from like Calais to Kiev. And so interestingly, whereas you'd think that from a Polish point of view, that you'd want road investment and the major roads to be concentrated and leading to and from and around the capital. In fact, from the EU's perspective, the important road was the route from Calais to Kiev via Berlin.
East, and Poland was just along the way.
Yeah.
And this is another thing about a lot of these infrastructure constructions don't necessarily help the specific country. They're more supposed to help other member states connect with other areas. So actually in Poland, they've been talking about a north-south road right now.
Which is what we really need, yes.
And actually, of course, this is very interesting because Poland has...
But that doesn't help the EU that much. So that's
what is it, the Three Seas Initiative or something like that?
Yes.
And so they're allying with Eastern and Southeastern European countries in something that's actually kind of independent of the European Union to improve transport and infrastructure itself.
Part of the north-south, going up to the Baltic states and going down south. And the whole issue is it's easier to move from Poland to Western Europe than it is from Poland to the Baltics or down south. This area hasn't been connected that much. Poland has just become kind of like a pit stop along the way for kind of like investments going east-west.
My final word on this report about the financial benefits of EU membership. In a weird way, it kind of reinforces the position of people like myself who are kind of, maybe skeptic is not the right word, but
you're a skeptic, Joe.
It reinforces the fact that it is strictly a financial arrangement. The EU came to the countries of Eastern Europe and said, look, do you want to join this rich people club and get showered with cash for the next 20 years? Yes or no? Duh. Of course they did. Of course they did. And by reminding Polish people how much more money they make thanks to the EU, they're basically saying, yeah, it is a financial thing. You benefit financially, which in many ways is the most important way. But, it doesn't address anything about the political and cultural issues that kind of, surround membership. We have to keep pretending that Poland and, say, Portugal have a common heritage somehow, or that Finland and Greece
wake up in the morning feeling used and abused, but it looks over on the counter, there's a wad of cash.
Exactly.
So exactly. Okay, I can do this.
So, we have to pretend that, we can all get along as one big European family, and we can't. But then they'll, that's the point when they walk in and say, but look at your bank account, look at your job opportunities. So it's basically paying everybody off. And that's what it is. I think that's what EU membership is about. Here, take this new highway and shut up.
And let's remember, actually, when Poland first joined, and it wasn't just Poland. I mean, there was other countries in the region that joined at the same time. But although, single market, free movement, kind of like, actually Poles were not allowed to just like hitch up in any Schengen country. In fact, Britain and Germany and Norway, which is not, of course, a member of the European Union, did allow Poles to come in whatever quantities they wanted to, but the rest of Europe, it was like
3, 4, 5 year waiting periods.
Yeah.
That's why there was one of the main reasons there was such a huge influx to the UK was because of the few countries that really opened up with no limitations. Plus, Poles were more likely to speak English as a second language than, say, Spanish.
Remember when the UK estimated that 10,000 Poles would come? 10,000.
They meant a day.
Yeah, they meant on every street.
No, but for instance, even Germany, that allowed a lot in. They still had some limitations. I think, like in the service industry and places like that, they said, okay, no full opening up until. So it's like, wait, is it a common market or not?
Right,
it's like
right.
it's
There's
either
no half
or.
measures. It either you're either in or out. Yeah. Let's try to get 2 quick issues. I see that we're really long-winded today talking about our different topics, and that's fine. But I did want to squeeze 2 more things in here. First, last week we saw the introduction of a new banknote. It's what's it called? Legal tender, but it's really more for collectors. It features Lech Kaczynski. Of course,
how do we know? I think it's Yaroslav.
the twin brother of the current leader of peace, who was lost, of course, in the Smolensk tragedy in 2011. It was a banknote. The nominal value is 20 zlotys, but in fact, it's being traded for about 100 zlotys. They also released a gold coin with a 500 zloty value, which I understand is being traded for almost 10,000.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, officially the silver coin, I think you buy it for like 1,000, so it's like twice.
Is it gold or silver?
It's silver.
Oh, silver.
And it's like officially you buy it for twice its nominal value, but once you try to buy it somewhere else because it's in limited quantity, the prices are going up like 3, 4, 5, 10 times.
Isn't the National Bank losing a lot of money on this deal? They're selling it for 1,000 or whatever, and it's worth 10,000.
Well, they're already selling it for more than if somebody came back to the bank and wanted to like
500.
break. Could you break this 500 into 100?
No, not in Poland.
They could,
no.
but you'd only get 500 instead of
I
the 1,000.
doubt the National Bank can make change for anything in this country. Nobody can make change. But this is not really for, a lot of people are making fun of this, people lining up, and the internet is full of these pictures, people literally lining up outside of banks across the country to buy these things. They're not really, I think, you tell me what you think, but I don't think these are Lech Kaczynski fans. These are collectors. And of course, every country has tons and tons of money collectors.
I've actually got somewhere, I think maybe in that drawer there, like a little plastic bag with, brand new kind of like freshly minted decimal coins from when decimalization came initially in 1968, and then the full process was in 1971. So I have like a 50 pence coin and a 10 pence coin and a 5 pence coin that are like absolutely pristine. And that was like, my sisters as well. It was like a little present.
I have that. My grandfather gave me the same thing when Germany was entering joining the euro. So he also had like this little bag which had like 1 coin of each denomination in it. And I also have like the bag with little paper on it. And I haven't opened up. It's like, the coolest little thing to have. I have to find it somewhere, but I still have it.
Somewhere at home, I think I use it as a bookmark. I have the old Dutch Gilders, which were beautiful. This was the most gorgeous. I guess it was an anti-counterfeiting thing. It is extremely complex design with beautiful shades of every color you can imagine. The most beautiful currency. And I think there were a lot of fantastic European currencies that were kind of lost to the euro.
Oh, the lira. Always like hilarious.
I love remember the old Hungarian forints that were like enormous? No?
Well, I've never been to Hungary.
Oh, okay, that's a good excuse. So the forints, I think they had a devaluation at some point. The forints from like the 90s, they were comically oversized. They were about
the size of a newspaper.
They were easily double the height of an American dollar and maybe $1.50 long. It was just like, what are you doing? It looked like a university diploma almost.
Actually,
like
on that side, I always thought that it was absolutely insane that, like, regardless of denomination, American banknotes the same color and the same size.
Yeah,
and so it's like super easy to kind of like switch a $1 for $100.
Well, I don't know about that.
In those like dark places always kind of hope that you think you're pulling out a $1 bill. It's like a $20 bill.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Dr. Mike has lots of experiences in dark strip clubs.
I should remind our listeners.
No, don't remind him of anything.
Okay.
Don't remind. I do remember. Just let's move on. One more story. We're going to venture into some territory that is kind of, we're out of touch with this demographic, but I'm curious about it. None of us are into rap. Anybody into rap?
No.
I think it's the lowest form of human communication. Actually, second lowest. Graffiti is the lowest.
I think
but
our
rap is the second
Irish
lowest.
friend was the most into rap.
Dave was into it. This is true.
So if Banksy made a rap record, you wouldn't be buying it?
No, I wouldn't care at all. But this is interesting for me. I'm curious to learn about this, although, again, this is not my world exactly. There's a Polish rapper named Mata. Am I saying that right? Mata?
I'm not 100% sure myself.
And he's recently struck a deal with McDonald's. Now, you talk about going mainstream. You can't get more mainstream than a promotional deal with McDonald's, right? So television commercials, all over the internet, of course, special offers in the stores. and he's become like a spokesman, I guess. He's the face of, the cool hip McDonald's aimed at a certain target market. McDonald's says
MC Donald's is now.
Yeah. McDonald's says
it makes sense.
McDonald's says they're not exactly seeing a rise in traffic to the stores, but they are happy with kind of their exposure to the younger demographic. This is something we don't see in Poland very much. You don't see celebrity spokesmen and women for McDonald's. Their commercials are kind of, generic, basically.
Well, it's all Robert Lewandowski, isn't it?
With McDonald's, you never saw, like, in the U.S., I remember, as a kid, it was always like sports. It was weird. It was like athletes were always promoting McDonald's, like from your Michael Jordans to your U.S. Olympic teams. It was always, McDonald's. Like, you guys don't eat this. This is why we're doing so well. They wanted, those athletes wanted you to eat more McDonald's so they'd have less competition in the field, I'm guessing. But this is one of the first time I've seen a celebrity actually.
Well, it's interesting because of the contrasts in reactions. A certain demographic, let's say 20 something and under, very much into Mata. Okay, definitely it's cool. But your Generation X, your 30 plus year olds, there seems to be a certain degree of hatred involved here and like resentment. Like, this is like not their thing.
Yeah, and I don't think McDonald's minds too much because that's an age demographic where people at that age, thinking more healthy, they've grown out of McDonald's. It's not really that positive.
Really? Oh, sorry.
I mean, I still like my Mickey D's all the time, but Mackers or whatever you want to, whichever abbreviated version of the name you like. But at that age group, it's more often that you go to McDonald's because your kids want to go there. So you have to build up the brand loyalty with like the younger generation. And the fact is, like, the last couple of decades, McDonald's has been having a lot of trouble when it comes to its brand. It's recognized, but not necessarily in a positive way. So something like this, it's like the teenagers, the 20-somethings, making them look to McDonald's as a more positive place, a more acceptable place to go and hang out and grab.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, like from a business perspective. I don't know how much they paid Mata. That's kind of like one of the secrets we can't find out. But, the experts suggested it's sizable. It's like they say 6 digits. 6 zeros, which would mean, $1 million plus is what which in the world of McDonald's is not a big deal. They spend that on toilet paper every day, I imagine. But, probably bad example, but they spend it on straws, let's say. Anyway, move on.
Actually, I'm just going to interrupt there.
Let me finish the point. That I wonder from a business perspective, if they, like Dr. Mike says, that, they're concerned about a falling reputation with the younger kids. They're less relevant in the age of home delivery when you can have everything, any different cool stuff brought to your door. McDonald's not seen as healthy, et cetera, et cetera. And if this is kind of maybe in some ways a desperate kind of, hello fellow kids, that meme was one of my favorites. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's a sign that all is not well with McDonald's in Poland. Josh.
Well, no, actually, I was just reminded of something that I read a year or two ago. That little known fact that by an enormous margin, the world's biggest retailer of salads is McDonald's.
Yep, biggest distributor of toys, biggest,
Wasn't that kind of like those statistics where like the biggest producer of rubber tires is Lego? It's like one of those statistics that, it's true until you really think about it or something.
Kind of cheating too.
Yeah, but...
Well, I scared because there's a McDonald's everywhere in the world, but yeah.
But no, I think this would generally help McDonald's. And like the stats that we were reading in this article were like, it did increase traffic, but it did increase revenue. So maybe a few people were buying more than they would otherwise. So if they're buying a little more than they would have otherwise, spend a little more money. Plus, it's increasing brand loyalty in a specific demographic that will be alive for the next 30 years. So that's a plus. I think one of the stats that they presented there was a little skewed because it's increased. Last month, I saw an increase of sales of like 60% year over year. It's like last time this year. I mean, last year. There was a reason why sales were down. So if they said 60% compared to October of 2019, okay, 60% of October of 2020. 2020 is a year is really going to make stats look weird.
But still, I think that when you get into a corporate giant like McDonald's, it's going with a wrapper is, it's out of character. It's a little bit risky. They could have easily gone with a safe, family-friendly, neutral, harmless entertainer, but they went with this guy with a little bit of an edge. And
you don't know what he's going to do in the next couple of years.
Yeah, he could show up in rehab, in 6 months or who knows. But it's just... it just makes you think about, what McDonald's is trying to achieve in the Polish market. I'm still pissed off at them for those goddamn paper straws. Those are the
I'm pissed off with the paper straws and the fact that they got rid of blue cheese sauce for chicken nuggets. I love that blue cheese.
They got rid of blue cheese sauce for chicken nuggets? Yeah. So what's left? Sweet and sour barbecue?
Sweet and sour, the barbecue. The
mustard.
The mustard and the śmietankowy, which is the other one that's okay, because I just don't like ketchup on chicken.
Maybe 5 choices was too many for
the blue cheese. I love
nugget
the blue
sauce.
cheese one.
Yeah.
Could have dropped the sweet and sour. They could have dropped the mustard if you asked me for chicken.
Just on the topic of McDonald's, I just realized I can't remember the last time a new McDonald's opened in Krakow. Maybe we're maxed out for McDonald's.
Though we did have the one that didn't expand.
The one on Shevska, and I think the last one to open was the one on Grodzka, yeah?
Probably, like 5 years ago.
Because out in the suburbs, out in the shopping centers, we haven't had a new one in ages. That's interesting.
We're probably long overdue a McDonald's special.
Very overdue, actually. Yeah, same thing with KFC and Burger King. Not a new one in a long time.
No, there was the one on Sevsko that was only 2 years ago that opened
Burger King?
up. Yeah,
It's more than 2 years.
Not by much,
for sure, more than 2 years.
Well, everything's more than 2 years ago because you've got to knock out a year.
Like that last year always kind of skews.
But I guess we are maxed out when it comes to fast food. It seems that we've hit saturation point.
Fortunately, we're not at the point where you go, like in the U.S., where you go into a neighborhood and there's just like a McDonald's falling apart and you're scared to go into it. Most McDonald's in Poland, when you go, no matter where,
they're nice.
They're nice. They're in great condition. They're pristine. Yeah. You don't have to die.
All right, let's not go down the rabbit hole of McDonald's. We could talk about this for 45 minutes more. We're already over time. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up, I think, for this week. Everybody, thanks for listening. KrakCast.pl is the website. Check out all of our back episodes there. And we'll catch you next time on the news.